welcome to Maison Otaku. Come in, have a seat.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Mike.
And we're here to talk to you about anime.
And a few other things this week.
Yes, this is going to be a really fun week, but oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, do we have some things to tell you about. Satan has purchased his ice skates, folks.
Yes. Well, to kick things off, we did another thing.
Yes. We weren't even really talking about this one, but
We're still taking credit.
absolutely, you cannot pass up this opportunity to claim credit for such an important...
Well, was it Aristotle, I believe, talk about a great being who is so perfect he cannot help but share his perfectness with the universe? So too do we bring you this.
Yeah. We, through this program and its remarkable influence in the American distribution market, have brought you Legend of the Galactic Heroes, courtesy of Sentai Filmworks.
The only thing that's even more mind-boggling is the fact that it wasn't Discotech.
Yeah, Discotech, asleep at the wheel? Although apparently they're bringing us Shin Getter Robo.
Well, Shin Getter versus Neo Getter, which is even weird. Like, again, no one asked, but thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although, if I am going to ask for something, I've been giving it a lot of thought, and I've been really good this year. So, if we could have a remastered Blu-ray of Project A-ko, I'm feeling that.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Don't touch the dub.
It's the Colonel!
Yeah, don't touch the dub, and don't do like they did with the bullshit remastered version of Mobile Suit Gundam, where they just like overwashed all the colors to get rid of the grain. But we know you know better.
Yeah, we trust you guys. Or Sentai. We wish you all the best of luck. We will actually be purchasing Legend of the Galactic Heroes because we've been waiting for a long time. So, if you want to continue along this path, definitely Project A-ko, something to look at. But, you know, in terms of historic licenses coming back, another amazing project.
Yeah, there's currently a Kickstarter. You may have heard us talk about Barefoot Gen before, an excellent film and a great historical manga. Actually noteworthy, I don't believe you mentioned on the show before, it was the first, at least full-length manga to ever get an official English translation. But the books themselves are kind of scarce, hidden and scattered around.
Absolutely. It was a very limited printing. It was more aimed at the indie comic purchaser rather than, well, at the time there wasn't really a manga market, and because it wasn't, you know, kung fu or anything, it couldn't be sold alongside of the Jade Man stuff.
Yep. But that is all getting fixed because there's currently a Kickstarter to republish it.
Yes.
Or, well, actually, even to publish the rest of it that wasn't published here.
Mm-hmm. And what's particularly fun and particularly noteworthy about this project is one of the first places they want copies of Barefoot Gen is school libraries.
Yes.
And we cannot undersell that enough.
Yeah, that's an amazing, like, I wholeheartedly applaud that.
For those of you who aren't familiar, Barefoot Gen is a first-person historical account of the bombings. You know, the bombing of, it was Nagasaki?
Hiroshima.
Of the bombing of Hiroshima. And the story from a survivor. It's both uplifting and heartbreaking. It's one of the most important works in anime.
Well, and it's worth noting the stance it takes. I mean, obviously he condemns, you know, the Americans for, well, nuking his city, and one could hardly blame him, but he equally condemns the Japanese government for starting the whole mess. So it's not really biased at all.
Absolutely. It dislikes the war.
Yes.
It feels the war was a waste. And specifically that it was a waste of the Japanese people. And that's really something. It's beautifully done. This is a Kickstarter we wholeheartedly support. So, link in the description. Give him a shout. Toss him a couple of bucks. Let's try and get this material into the hands of young people who could really stand to learn more about this chapter of our history. And as far as acquisitions, a little brief acquisition of mine. I really wish I'd come up with a more elegant segue, but we do things this way. Again, classic anime, wicked classic, although it was a remake of a wicked classic, Kikaider the Animation. I've had Volume 1 for a long time. I picked up Volume 4 a while ago. Trail went dead. This past weekend, I actually got the chance to pick up Volume 3. So I'm one volume away from a complete Kikaider the Animation set. Which is thrilling. I mean,
yes.
Beautifully animated show. Right around the same time they were redoing a lot of Ishinomori stuff.
And important to mention, it's a hell of a lot easier to get that than the rest of Cyborg 009 that they didn't release here.
Right. Sentai!
Hey, there you go.
Discotheque. Go for that.
Yes.
Especially with the new CGI film that they're also doing.
Yep.
So there you go. There's a nice push, and that's TV-ready stuff right there.
Yes.
Man, lots of anime history here.
Oh yeah, tons.
But that's not really all that's interesting, is it?
Oh no, not by a long shot.
Mm-hmm. And so we want to talk to you about other interesting things. So stick with us. We're going to get a little patriotic. So, if you're anything like us, and you're watching Maison Otaku, you're probably an otaku yourself. You're probably a fan of a large variety of anime. Or maybe you're a little specialized. But either way, I'm willing to bet that you haven't given much thought to American or European productions. That's kind of a shame. There's actually quite a lot interesting out there. And a lot more than you'd think. Unfortunately, we take such a dim view because of all of the prude comedy and princess films that have been turned out into the marketplace. So, this week, we're going to give a chance for a Western animation to shine and uncover a couple of neat gems. Here we go!
So, we all have that one film or TV show that we caught part of was when we were a little kid. We just have that tiny little sliver of a memory in our head. And aside from one or two scenes, all we remember is that we liked it. You know, we've all had those. When you get to about our age, you've pretty well dug them all up.
Yes. It's a fun process. And strangely enough, the internet has made it extraordinarily easy.
Well, for some of them anyway. Unfortunately, when you don't have a name to go on, you spend your whole life searching. I had such a film. We rented it from the video store, and well, my mom claimed I wasn't allowed to watch it because I was the rest of it because I was acting up. But actually sitting down to watch it later in life, it's probably because the movie does not care about body counts. No. And as I already explained, my mom was a cartoon Nazi. But a few years ago, I was going through the $5 bin at FYE, and this cover stood out to me. I'm like, that's it! And the greatest fear you always have with that when you find one of these things is you've built so much hype for yourself that there's no way it could possibly live up to it. Here's one of those instances where it actually exceeded every single one of my expectations. I am talking about Starchaser, The Legend of Orin.
I was completely bugger when he mentioned this title to me. So we actually had to sit down and watch it. And it's fun. It's actually a fun little theatrical animated film done in 84, 85.
85, yeah.
And it's Star Wars. That's the best way to describe it. It's Star Wars.
Primarily, it's a copy off of Star Wars in a lot of ways, but you know, as we've said in a previous episode, I won't go into it, but the most common criticism I hear of it is, well, it's too much like Star Wars. And I'm sorry, but criticizing a fantasy action adventure for being too much like Star Wars is a bit like asking us to paint a mural in your bathroom and saying, no, I'm sorry, those angels are a bit too much like something Botticelli would do. You're criticizing something for perfectly doing what it's supposed to be doing. And you're quite welcome to say, well, I don't like that sort of thing, but that should be your criticism, not, oh, it fails because of these things.
Right.
But the other thing, too, the way I always describe it to people, and I mean, feel free to disagree with me, but like I often say, it's a lot. If they had set out to make a PG-rated heavy metal movie, but then made it good.
Yes. Taking out all of the content that makes heavy metal rated R, and then concentrating on making what remains, the theming and the art style, really good and really fun to follow.
Yep.
Especially in this, space fantasy romp that they put together for Starchaser.
And that's not to say it's completely tame. They basically keep most of the violence, just tone it down by about 30%, and
there's a couple of really kind of pervy jokes, particularly revolving around the robot girl Silica.
Yeah.
Arthur, where the hell are the personality circuits on these G2 fembots?
According to the internal schematics manual of the G2 class government service fembot, all personal characteristic circuits are located in her... You're definitely looking in the wrong place.
Well, where are they?
They're in her... posterior.
You wouldn't dare.
Help! 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 What?
There. That should do it.
Hi.
That's more like it.
Has anyone ever told you that you're awfully cute for a meat body?
Oh god, the number of feminists she would piss off right now.
It was a different time. It was a completely different set of standards.
But great characters, lovable characters, doing interesting things in space.
Yeah.
I mean, what more do you want?
Absolutely. And a really interesting factoid about it, it was actually the very first 3D animated film. A lot of use of early computer animation alongside of the rotoscoping.
Yes. Some of the rotoscoping in that is so freaking good. Like, in addition to the characters just being rotoscoped. Now, some of the stuff was done with CGI, but they even rotoscoped the CGI.
Yes.
But some of it, they actually took, like, models from Star Wars-style practical effects, did the full shot, and then rotoscoped that.
Yeah.
That is commitment.
Mm-hmm. And just in case, because there might be some folks out there who aren't students of Animation 101.
Or my mom.
Or your mom, whom you've pointed out as a cartoon Nazi.
Yes.
Rotoscoping is a process by which models or actors are filmed going through the motions of a particular scene, and then the film is separated out frame by frame and traced over to create the animation cells.
To put it even more simply, it's basically the paint-on-cell equivalent of motion capture.
Yes. There have been a lot of really great examples of rotoscoping over the years that have really worked well. Actually, one of the most famous examples of rotoscope animation is the ball sequence from Disney's Cinderella.
Yeah.
So, it's a long-standing process. It works extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
One of the other films we're going to cover today is also very heavy in rotoscoping.
But yes, the visual, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the story, but the visuals definitely are the strong point of Orion. And it's as Justin pointed out when we were watching, it really is just this fun adventure where our heroes just run from set piece to set piece.
Yeah.
And that is not me putting it down in any way. It's perfectly fine to have a movie like, I mean, heck, Birth, aka Planet Busters, that's what the whole movie was.
Absolutely. It's fun. It's playful. If you say liked Redline, or if you enjoy
Lensman.
or if you enjoy Lensman,
Very Lensman.
very Lensman, then try Starchaser. It's actually really worth digging it up. Changing gears slightly. One of my personal favorite experiences growing up a fan of animation was experiencing a film, a series of shorts that was all the things that when I was 11 I really shouldn't have been watching. Thank you, Dad, for somewhat inattentive parenting, because he's also how I got to see RoboCop, Color of Money, a lot of really great films way before I was actually ready for the content.
Hey, at least your cousin didn't show you 80 Police Files when you were 7.
Try to remember. Trash my body like you did before. I beg you. Hurry. Shoot those bullets into my breast. Hurry. Kill me. If you don't, I'll...
Yeah, you know. Irresponsibility is a big part of what shaped our generation.
Yes.
But anyway, the film. The film is heavy metal. And if you're not familiar with heavy metal at this point, you're probably really, really missing out. The material comes from Heavy Metal Magazine, which is a comics anthology. It's a monthly comics anthology that was actually originally produced in France as Metal Hurlant. It was brought here to the States by National Lampoon magazine in the 70s and struck a really big chord with the growing independent comic movement, because all of a sudden here was this great place for all of these lowbrow artists to congregate. So you had R. Crumb, you had Harvey Picard, you had Frank Frazetta, you had Boris Vallejo, all doing their thing in this great, well-backed magazine.
And it's worth mentioning that this is, well riding the crest of the sci-fi wave.
Yes. Star Wars had just hit big. Of course, with Led Zeppelin, constantly referring to them. Lord of the Rings was back in the spotlight. So fantasy was right and rising up. So to have this magazine that had all of that content, it hit big. And as it hit big, funnily enough, they decided, well, let's finance a movie. And of course, you can't just take one story out of heavy metal, because it's not just one story.
Well, no, you can do that, but then that's called Heavy Metal 2000. That's another thing. So.
Yeah. So what they ended up doing was a series of shorts, an anthology film. All different styles, with all different little stories, kind of tied together by the idea that a malevolent glowing orb is the cause of all of the misery in the universe. It's called the Lochnar. It's kind of cool. But it goes from moving photograph animation to rotoscoping to heavy cartoons in the R. Crumb style. And just transition to transition to transition.
Effectively, it does whatever the hell it damn well pleases.
It's full of nudity, it's full of sexuality, it's full of violence, it's full of graphic violence. Barbarian mutants fighting off a large-breasted warrior woman with buzzsaw hands, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, the wide, both for the movie and the magazine, the wide array of sci-fi stories and fantasy stories, the creative set pieces and ideas were all a big part of the draw, but it can't be denied that cartoon boobs was equally as big a part of the draw.
Mm-hmm. And it had an all-star cast. John Candy does voices in at least 3 of the segments, and all 3 segments that he does are fantastic. Personal favorite, So Beautiful, So Dangerous, which is this hysterical segment where John Candy is a robot who is apparently trying to line up some sort of invasion of Earth using an android scientist, Dr. Anrak. And when they go to retrieve him, they botch the retrieval and pick up this hot Jewish girl. So the robot nails the Jewish girl while his pilot and co-pilot snort coke. Well, Nyborg.
Can they give us some space coke, man? Look at...
And that goes about as well as predicted.
Mm-hmm. And it's just madcap. It's just hysterical. And the soundtrack. Well, if you're going to do a movie called Heavy Metal, you better have an awesome soundtrack. Trust, Riggs, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Stevie Nicks, Journey, Grand Funk Railroad, Sammy Hagar. Everything you could ask for. So much you could have a lot of fun with. It's a party movie, really.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a large group of friends, you want to laugh, you want to enjoy yourself, you don't want to take anything too seriously, Heavy Metal.
Yeah. And it's fitting because the way most people saw it in the first place is they all went over to their friend's house who had the least responsible dad and watched it over there.
I had several friends over like that.
Starting off with another anecdote, this next series I'm going to be talking about is a great counterpoint to all the people out there, and some of you might even be our viewers, who would say to me, Mike, you just like all this old stuff for nostalgia. We've all heard it, some of us even said it.
To say that classic cartoons and classic anime thrive on rose-colored glasses, it's a cop-out.
Yes. It's not entirely unfounded in some instances. Like I would definitely not be a Sailor Moon, not be interested in that at all if I didn't grow up with it. But that's not to say it's the same for everything else. But the point I'm making is, this series, even though this was well during the heyday of my childhood, I completely missed the train. I didn't know it existed until I was in my early 20s and didn't even actually see it until I was in my mid-20s. I am talking about Exosquad.
If there's a small humming bit there with some crickets and so forth,
yeah,
you're well and truly welcome to it. It ran very briefly.
It got cut short on top of that.
Yeah.
And while we did finally, in about the time I finally saw it, we finally got a DVD release of it. Universal refuses to release Season 2, which is the majority of the series. Most of it is on YouTube, though, if you don't mind watching it in a squished, tiny little box.
Right.
Because of the copyright bots.
That's really one of the unfortunate things. If there isn't a large viewer base, a large nostalgia base for a vintage cartoon, it's not going to have an official release. So many of these things were produced by little under-the-radar companies just struggling to get to syndication.
Well, and this suffered a similar fate. Obviously, Universal's a pretty big company. This was produced by their animation division. Unfortunately, one of the reasons it got cut short is that was right as their animation division was folding.
Yes.
But on to what the series actually is, because I'm sure you're wondering why the heck we're harping on about this. Effectively, the meeting that took place when they were deciding this, the guy at the head of the room was like, "Hey, anyone here seen Mobile Suit Gundam?" At which I'm sure 2 or 3 people raised their hands. Let's do that.
Yeah, it's a stateside mecha series.
Yes.
Who knew?
Yeah. And one of the things that's routinely praised for is, well, first of all, there are few to no magic parachutes. It's actually pretty serious through and through. It is an American televised animated war drama, but, still pretty much aimed at kids, but still doing the full war drama thing.
And it covers some really interesting concepts. I mean, the war being fought is between the remnants of humanity and the Neo-Sapiens, who are the next generation of humans that were biologically engineered for all the work humanity didn't want to do.
Oh yeah, yes. Forcing an entire population into, servitude, that's never going to go wrong.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic idea.
Yeah. But and actually, that's one of the great things this tackles. It tackles, race relations, and not in that kind of corny, cheesy way that the X-Men cartoon did, because that was just kind of dumb.
It's amazing that this is something from the 90s about diversity and race that manages not to be cloying and saccharine.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I mean, it talks about a lot of things. Of course, it talks about genetic engineering. You can't have stuff like this. It actually deals with, war, wartime occupation. He even talks about wartime enemy collaborators.
Mm-hmm. And it's really, story-wise, plot-wise, structure-wise, a lot of good stuff.
Yes.
Art-wise, it's 1990.
Yeah. See, the main issue the main issue with this is it was kind of born too late, so there's a lot of 90s-isms. I mean, the artwork itself is good in my opinion, but in the design work, there's a lot of neon-colored everything. Everyone has really, really stupid hair in the future, apparently. With a few exceptions, like Nara Burns, her hairdo kind of works, but, I mean, actually getting onto that, though, you have this wonderful cast of, kind of similar to what we were talking about in Pat Labor, these very three-dimensional, multifaceted characters.
Even the big bad, Phaeton.
Yeah.
He's got some stuff going on. He's got a reason for what he's doing.
Well, and one of the wonderful things they did with Phaeton near the end, because Neo-Sapiens clone themselves a lot, Phaeton's clone comes about, and there's a bunch of people who wanted to destroy him just because he's a clone of Phaeton, but they actually bring forth the point. He is not Phaeton. He is a different individual who just so happens to be genetically identical, who has done nothing wrong, who has no desire to hurt anyone.
High concept, very interesting, well done, canceled early. Just in general, one of those, if this had hit, we could have seen more. We could have seen stateside mecha.
Well, yeah, especially because it was that crap that, again, suffering from another 90s-ism, it got canceled on a cliffhanger. I'm just going to give it away. I don't care because there is no more rest of it. In the last... spoiler alert! In the last episode, they set it up where, okay, the war is over, there's some relations going with the humans and Neo-Sapiens, they might start working together a bit more, but it looks like they're going to have to because these, like, crazy freaking Tyranid-looking spaceships pop out of warp and start heading to Earth, so now we have an alien invasion on our hands, and we never saw it.
Yeah. Like, oh.
Like, shit was about to get real.
Yeah. So, yeah, Exosquad.
Yep.
There's a fun one.
Yep. Mecha, explosions, great cast of characters. What more do you want?
Uh-huh. Okay. A few episodes ago, of course, we talked about losing Sir Christopher Lee. And I actually omitted one very big thing about him for me because I was saving it for this episode. And that's my favorite of his films. Lord of the Rings was great. The Hammer Dracula films were fantastic. But for me, it was actually his performance as the miserable King Haggard in The Last Unicorn that really cemented him as one of my favorite people in film. And a good portion of that is because the film itself is fantastic. Neat film if you're not familiar with it. Basically the story of a unicorn who believes she is the last after overhearing some hunters. A passing butterfly informs her that the Red Bull chased the rest of the unicorns away and covered up their hoof prints so that no one could chase them. So she sets off on a quest. It's not an action-packed film. It's a film that is about searching. It's a film with an all-star cast. Just like Heavy Metal, there were some real heavy hitters in this one. Sir Christopher Lee as King Haggard. Jeff Bridges, you may know from Tron, was the voice of Haggard's son, Prince Lear. Mia Farrow was the voice of the unicorn. Angela Lansbury plays Mommy Fortuna. Renee Auberjonois, who plays Odo on Deep Space Nine. was the voice of the laughing skeleton. It's just great cast. Great cast of characters. The introduction of the scullery maid, Molly Grew, who lashes out at the unicorn because, she's middle-aged, she's weathered, she was the kept woman of the pretty crappy bandit Captain Cully. And she lashes out at the unicorn. She says, where were you when I was young, when I was new, when I was one of those maidens you're supposed to visit? And that's kind of the spirit of the film. Where does youth go? Where does joy go? Even Haggard, the villain of the film, because he collaborates with the Red Bull, spoiler alert, to gather up the unicorns and drive them into the sea where they dance upon the waves outside his castle. He says, this is the only thing that's ever given me joy. This is it. I adopted a son. That brought me no joy. Land, balls, a kingdom, power. I am bereft of joy but for this one thing. And I will keep that one thing. I will possess every unicorn just so that I can feel that one bit of joy. It's
very Char's counterattack.
It is. It's like Char's counterattack. It's like it's kind of got a little bit of Beautiful Dreamer to it as well when you really think of it.
I don't know if I see where you're going with that, though.
As far as emotional context, as far as emotional punch.
Well, I was more drawing the Char's counterattack allegory of,
obsession.
Well, that too, but supposedly it being Tomino trying to explain to kids what growing up is, and of course being all depressing and Tomino about it.
Yeah. If Tomino directed a movie about unicorns,
it would probably be this, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But funnily enough, there is an anime connection.
Yes, Topcraft Studios actually animated at least a good portion of this. I don't know if they were the only.
It was the full.
It was just them? Okay. But Topcraft Studios, at least most of the people involved in it, eventually went on to found Studio Ghibli, which I should hope at this point needs no introduction.
Yes. The bulk of the key animators, background artists, and so forth from Last Unicorn, as well as Rankin Bass's other fantasy production, Flight of Dragons, were Studio Topcraft. If you watch the credits of the film, you'll see a lot of Japanese names in there. And these guys then, after Topcraft folded, after Rankin Bass went back stateside, they banded together and put together Castle Cagliostro and Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, under Hayao Miyazaki. So this film has a lot to do with the prestige of that art house.
It's kind of, fine, we'll make our own animation studio, but without blackjack and hookers.
Instead with beautiful movies about growing up, regret, a lot of the topics that Last Unicorn covers.
Yeah, basically.
Just without a great soundtrack by the folk rock band America.
Oh yeah, I forgot they did that.
Yeah, if you like acoustic rock, and there's another pretty narrow Venn diagram, anime fans who like acoustic rock, then the music of the Last Unicorn, songs like Walking Man's Road, the actual song The Last Unicorn, they'll all really suit you. They're just played very well. They fit in with the movie perfectly.
Well, and I think a thing to mention about Last Unicorn, kind of similar to one thing I pointed out that was a strong point about Starchaser, is the set pieces. The beautifully drawn backgrounds. Like, actually, he mentioned the scene with the laughing skeleton. Just the way that thing was illustrated, that's one of the scenes that actually, that's probably about the only scene in my head that's absolutely vivid.
Oh, absolutely. And several scenes are astonishing. The unicorn later in the film is transformed into a woman to sneak her into Haggard's castle, and Schmendrick the magician, who is a fantastic character. He is full of so many smart-ass quips. You will love him. He dubs her Lady Amalthea, his niece. And there's a beautiful sequence where she transforms back into the unicorn, and it's absolutely stunning. It was one of the very first things that made me realize I want to be more involved. I want to learn more about animation and cartoons. This is what I like. For that matter, I would also like to point out the source of the look is very classical. It was actually all taken from the unicorn tapestries in a castle in England, which are a beautiful set of, I want to say, 17th or 16th century tapestries that are, unicorns at play around fountains and lions and so forth. Just absolutely gorgeous, and they just took one look at those. Peter S. Beagle, the original author, said, "This is what I was looking when I wrote the book. Here's my screenplay. Try and keep that look." And they looked at the tapestry and said, "Yeah, that's it. We don't need to change a thing."
Yep.
And absolutely. We hope in sharing these with you, our fellow otaku, you realize that there's really such a huge wealth. I mean, we covered 3 American and 1 Canadian, French, American hybrid films. And we hope that really excites you. Because good animation is as good as apple pie.
Where the hell did you get pie?
I do many things when you're not paying attention.
Clearly.
Clearly. Hi, folks.
It's only 2 a.m.
Yeah, it's recommendation time. My turn. But Mike and I were just joking around about just some random Gundam nonsense, trying to recall things about 08th MS Team, which, fantastic show, but it's not what I'm going to recommend this week. This week, in keeping with our theme, I'm going to throw our theme out the window.
Yes. Just in case we got a little too far out your comfort zone.
Instead, I'm going to go straight to the root, which is Osamu Tezuka. I'm going to go there by way of 2 of the modern masters, Katsuro Otomo and Rintaro, on his good day.
Yes.
Metropolis. Metropolis is one of those works that was so much a labor of love, a passion project, that every single frame is dripping with that little extra.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fault it.
I mean, it's arguably the closest we've come to Akira since.
Absolutely, and Ultimo is involved. Rintaro, this is undoubtedly his second best work, arguably a match for his best work. Go where you will with it, but
the point is, the people who are saying it is his first best work are, well, as you often point out,
kind of wrong.
Yes.
But that's because his first best work is My Youth in Arcadia. And we'll cover My Youth in Arcadia, but right now we're talking Metropolis. Metropolis is based on an Osamu Tezuka manga from Tezuka's early days that he based on the poster to the classic Fritz Lang silent black and white science fiction movie Metropolis.
And that's about where the similarities end, more or less.
Yes, there is a young robotic girl, and that's where it's up, because that's what he saw on the poster, but he was so taken with the poster that he wanted to create something based on that. And by all means, if you love science fiction, if you have any love for science fiction, you do need to see Metropolis, because so much of the language of science fiction in film comes from that movie, and it is amazing. And you specifically because so much footage has been lost or restored over the years, and nobody was ever quite sure how the footage was originally arranged, there's about 6 or 7 different edits of the film floating around. Track down the Giorgio Moroder edit. It's one of the most complete, and it has a soundtrack by Queen.
I forgot about that.
So, there's that. But that's
a whole other thing, yeah. This movie, Metropolis, on the other hand.
This movie, Metropolis.
Actually, talking about different versions, though, kind of interesting feature on the DVD here. It actually has, in the language options, the ability to have the Japanese audio and the English audio playing at the same time. So if you're just like a lonely audiophile, like or AV nerd like us,
yeah. There's also in the special features alternate camera angles. Of
I forgot that. Yeah,
significant scenes, because they did test reels of so many different angles because they wanted to get this so right. This is the other big Tezuka film. The biggest one, I think everyone pretty much agrees, is Phoenix 2772.
Well, no, not a lot of people don't agree with that because very few people have seen that.
Stateside.
Yeah, exactly, stateside, yeah.
But this film, it was brought over by Columbia TriStar. It did actually get a theatrical rating and a theatrical run in art house theaters.
And I was actually lucky enough to see it in its theatrical run. Actually, shortly before the, because I saw it at the Madstone. Is that the one in Coventry that used to be there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that there. Unfortunately, that was like one of the last things they played. That I saw there anyway, like a few months before it closed. I could be wrong about the timeline, but anyway, shortly before it closed.
Yes.
So that was nice.
And it's a film that really deserves that big screen experience. It's a very simple story. Young robotic girl created in the image of this Baron's daughter. She runs off because Baron's son is anti-robot. Meets up with the young boy in the underside of town, and they have adventures and they grow fond of each other. Story of class, story of the haves and have-nots, story of worker revolution. It's fantastic. There's so many little themes.
Oh, and we can't forget the soundtrack.
Oh.
If you like the I'm kind of loath to use this term a lot, but the juxtaposition of the soundtrack to visuals in Fallout, kind of similar thing going on here. You have, this, albeit retro, far future, but with like a really old school jazzy soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful, especially because they keep kind of that crackly audio quality to it.
And it works so perfectly with the, classic Osamu Tezuka art style.
Yeah. And this is one of the few translations of a Tezuka work that keeps so much of his art style intact while making it look fresh. We can't undersell Metropolis. You will not be disappointed if you go in expecting a lush, beautiful experience crafted with love by two masters.
Yep. It's perfectly drawn. It's heavily animated. I can't think of a single scene in that movie where there isn't something moving.
Yes.
On camera. And worth mentioning, this is basically Rintaro's penance for X.
Yes, if you ever felt X the movie was a crime against cinema, here is Rintaro's reprieve.
Yep.
So watch Metropolis, give some Yankee stuff a try, and from all of us here at Maison Otaku,
this is Mike
and Justin saying, enjoy what you watch
and share what you enjoy.
I shared what I enjoy. And now they think I'm weird.
When the last eagle flies over the last crumbling mountain, and the last lion roars at the there, unbelieving that the last unicorn. When the first breath of winter through the flowers is icing, and you look to the north, and a pale moon is rising, and it seems like all is dying, and would leave the world to mourn. In the distance, hear the laughter of the last unicorn. I'm alive. I'm alive. When the last moon is cast over the last star of morning, and the future has passed without even a last desperate warning, then look into the sky where through the clouds a path is torn. Look and see her, how she sparkles. It's the last unicorn. I'm alive. I'm
Wait. What movie's got space coke and Jewish chicks?